And now on the line is Independent Councillor for the Ballymun-Finglas Local Electoral Area, Noeleen Reilly. Noeleen, welcome to the programme.
Thanks very much for having me, Darren.
Noeleen, what inspired me to get in touch with you today was reading an article in this week's Northside People West where you expressed your disappointment that the planned primary healthcare centre for Finglas still has not happened yet, and we will talk about this in a few minutes. As this is my first interview with you though, although I understand that you are no stranger to Near FM, could you tell me how you are getting on as a councillor in general for your area? You've been a councillor since 2014, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been a councillor for, as you said, since May 2014. And when I first got elected, it was to the Ballymun Santry Whitehall area. So in 2019 elections, they changed the boundaries. So Ballymun was put in with Finglas, and Santry and Whitehall was put in with Cllr and Darndale. So there was a bit of a change there for me, and I ran in the Ballymun-Finglas end because I live in Ballymun, and that would be my core area. So but it's been really good to get I suppose to know residents in Finglas, all the issues in Finglas. It's a very similar area to Ballymun in terms of social issues and the things that would come up. It's strange not being a councillor for the Santry Whitehall area, given that there was some large projects taking place there, and would have been heavily involved in them. But obviously, we would still deal with residents in those areas. But I suppose that's the nature of kind of elections, and the boundaries can change all the time. So in one term, you can be dealing with one set of residents, and if you're lucky enough to get elected the next time, a totally new set of residents that you have to get to know and learn the issues in those areas.
I know you live in Ballymun, and you just mentioned it there, and I did a couple of interviews in the last few months with Andrew Montague, as former councillor, and I know that in parts, just talk about Ballymun for a couple of minutes, a few minutes, in parts of Ballymun, crack cocaine is a huge issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge issue in Ballymun, it's a huge issue in Finglas, it's a huge issue across many communities in Dublin, and I suppose, we've done a piece of work around a particular report, which is probably why Andrew was on. I suppose identifying the issues, and I suppose trying to see if we can come up with solutions to them. The issues have been identified many times before, but the solution's never been found. So I sincerely hope that the powers that be in government will actually listen to us this time. It's certainly not an issue that's in Ballymun, and we're isolated in terms of that. It is an issue across the city, and I think that really an approach needs to be taken, because with the heroin epidemic in the 80s, we are still suffering from that as a community, and families are still suffering from that. And now with crack cocaine, it's just a totally different type of drug, and people react very differently on it. And it is, again, it's just so sad to see it destroying families and destroying communities again. And just when you think, we've been through the regeneration in Ballymun, and the expectation that regeneration was going to make things better for people living here, and I would say it hasn't. It was very much a physical regeneration, but there was no social and economic regeneration with that, and that has been, I suppose, one of the failures of the regeneration. You can't just replace flats with houses and think everything is going to change. But yeah, we've a lot of work to do in the area to try and tackle some of those issues, and obviously just to try and make things better for people.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe come back to you in the future to do a longer, in-depth interview, maybe focusing solely on crack cocaine and maybe other drugs as well. Because I understand, across many areas of the country, there are other drugs as well that affect a lot of areas, like alcohol and cannabis addiction. When I say cannabis addiction, I mean amongst young men, adolescents in particular. That's a huge issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Like, there's a lot of poly-use of drugs, so people would be on cocaine, tablets, cannabis, like alcohol, crack cocaine, heroin. It's probably unusual that you would find someone that's just on one particular
Mm.
type of drug, which in itself, I suppose, makes treatment of that very difficult. There are a lot of supports in Ballymun that I would imagine a lot of other communities don't have, and that's purely because we had such a bad drug problem in the 80s. But it's not enough, and it's certainly not working. And what's really sad for me is that there's a lot of young people involved in drug dealing, on street dealing, vulnerable young people who may not have had the best starts in life, and they have been groomed by some of the bigger drug dealers. And I suppose that concerns me because it's just such a waste of life, it's such a waste of young people. And like, a lot of them wouldn't have been born when the regeneration happened, so they only know Ballymun after the regeneration. And like, to see a lot of them involved in drug dealing is really sad, and it's just another factor in how the regeneration just didn't achieve what it was supposed to achieve. Because like, in no way, after spending €1 billion, should you have such an amount of young people dealing on the streets.
Okay, before we talk a bit more about the primary healthcare centre plan for Finglas, can you tell me a bit more about the other big issues you're dealing with as a councillor on a day-to-day or week-by-week basis?
Okay, sure. I suppose the big issue is housing, and that that has been one of the biggest issues for quite a long time. And I suppose every councillor would have similar, I suppose, experiences. I would represent an area where there's a high demand for social housing, and so that in itself,
Hmm.
has some complications. And I suppose there's a lot of building actually planned for both Ballymun and Finglas in the coming years, and that is great to see. Um, so hopefully we can put a good dent in not just social housing lists, but also providing affordable housing for people, which is really important for sustainable communities, that there's a good mix of income in all areas. Because again, going back to Ballymun, like, that was mainly council housing with people on very low incomes, and that has had a huge impact on the area, a huge impact on the ability to attract business, create employment. So we do need a mix of incomes in all areas to
Hmm.
sustain communities.
And as regards, I know in some parts of your local electoral area there's a good few council tenants. The lack of a strong house maintenance department for council tenants in Dublin City Council, that's a huge issue as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose I think that, like, there probably isn't enough people working in Dublin City Council in all areas. So, and that would include housing maintenance. So, sometimes people can be waiting quite a while. Like, I actually don't think it's Ballymun is one of the worst areas for that. We have a good maintenance team there. It's just because there's so much, like 70% of the housing in Ballymun is council, so you can imagine the demands on Dublin City Council in providing the maintenance there. So like, there really needs to be a huge increase in recruitment at Dublin City Council level, and particularly I think in apprenticeship schemes, and taking young people out of disadvantaged areas, and giving them opportunities. I think the council is really well placed to do that.
And I believe next year it's planned to happen that the house maintenance for Dublin City Council for the whole north side is going to be located at the headquarters in Ballymun, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's going to be over beside IKEA. So again, that will be great. There'll be 800 new workers in Ballymun every day, and we're hoping that that will support local business. A new cafe actually opened in Ballymun this week, and it has been doing really well, which is great to see. but with the Northside depot moving to Ballymun and other businesses opening, we're hoping that will have an impact and support the businesses that are there. But yeah, I think that's a really positive move for Ballymun, and the fact that we are going to have community facilities like recycling facilities and bring centres on our doorstep can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, okay, that's great news. Yeah, to talk a bit more about the primary healthcare centre plan for Finglas, I understand that this issue has been going on for over several years now. Can you fill our listeners in, Noeleen, a bit about this whole story?
Yeah, so this is going on for really a decade now, and a site was identified in Finglas West a number of years ago, and it was a Dublin City Council site, and they would have had to dispose of it, and it just didn't get through a local area level. So this was before my time as a Finglas councillor, but the HSC have come up and identified a different site very near to that site at the back of the old Church of Annunciation. But I suppose we've been hearing this for a couple of years now, and it's still in legals. It's still they're still negotiating land swaps between the Department of Education and the ETB. So it's just everything seems to take so long, and it's really, really frustrating, because obviously there was a need identified for a primary healthcare centre in Finglas, and that need hasn't certainly gone away in 10 years, but it really shouldn't take 10 years to deliver healthcare services in a community that has no doctors, no other services I suppose testing children to see if they're on the spectrum, for providing mental health facilities. None of that at all exists in Finglas West or Finglas South, and that has placed a huge demand on nearby medical facilities in the area. There's not one doctor in all of Finglas South or West, and I suppose that has been one of the reasons why a primary healthcare centre was identified. But the fact that it goes between Dublin City Council, the HSC, the ETB, and the building in itself will probably only take 18 months, but the legal seem to just drag on for years and years and years, and it's not acceptable at all, and that demand hasn't gone away. And we are looking at building more homes for people in Finglas West, so again that will increase the demand there. But it's just, I find it just utterly frustrating and a sad indictment on how we do things in this country, that you can award a community a Finglas primary healthcare centre, and 10 years later it's not delivered, and it'd probably be 13, 14 years before it's actually people can walk in the doors there.
Jeez. Okay, and I understand that the HSE are short a lot of professionals as well to work on primary healthcare teams. Could you tell me, Noeleen, if you believe that the people of Finglas are really missing out on not having a primary healthcare centre, bearing in mind that whenever it is built there may not be enough staff to work in it?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. There's a huge, I suppose, shortage of workers in all sectors at the moment. But I deal with people all the time who cannot source the doctor for their basic medical needs, and I think they really are losing out by not having medical facilities in the area, and they're having to go to see if they can source doctors in nearby areas who are already full, and some of them are having to travel long distances to actually find a doctor that will deal with them. So it's just not acceptable at all. It really isn't. It's one of the biggest needs in Finglas, and here we are a decade later still talking about it.
Okay, to come towards the end of the interview, Noeleen, we talk a bit about some good news now. First of all, I believe that this is great news. There's a new resource centre in Finglas West getting built. Can you tell us a bit more about this and any other maybe good news you have in your area?
Yeah. Again, another need that was identified was a family resource centre for Finglas West, and I suppose again, trying to find a appropriate location for that was vital. So that's in partnership with Bernardo's, and construction has started on that this week. And again, that's like something that would be just so hugely beneficial to the community. There's one here in Ballymun, and I cannot tell you the work that it does. It caters for really everyone. It has like children's after school programs, it has seniors citizens clubs, it has counselling for people that need it, it holds community events, and there's a lot of vulnerable children living in Finglas West, and a lot of vulnerable families, and I think the support that a family healthcare centre will childcare centre will give them will just be unbelievable. So it's just great to see that that's actually happening. And I suppose there's a lot happening actually in Finglas, when once it eventually gets going. But the library, the Finglas Library, is moving from Finglas Village. It's a kind of a very old building. It doesn't suit people with disabilities. It's outdated really, so it's moving down to Seamus Ennis Road. So that's where the old post office was. So it's going to be a new state-of-the-art building with all the mod cons. So that's actually going to be a really, really, I suppose, exciting project for Finglas Village. And again, that has started. So that's great that that's happening. But yeah, there's so much happening in Finglas. We're meeting next week to discuss a big housing project on the Kildonan lands in Finglas West. And that will provide a couple of hundred homes for people, both social and affordable, and that's another positive as well. So lots and lots happening in Finglas as always.